Welcome to more World of Warplanes content from the Noble Q. This video is a discussion and full review of the Tier 8 British multi-role fighter, the Hawker Tempest V PV. Hello there. Here we have on the airfield the new Tempest V PV. If you're watching in May 2024, this plane is being made available via a chain of 30 combat missions. That chain of missions can be acquired in an operation order that will drop from supply crates, which are the rewards for completing missions in the Gathering Storm event. That is about to start, and during it, you will be able to fly in two alternative game modes, Bomber Escort and Attrition, plus the regular Conquest mode. The operation order should drop quickly from supply crates, and I expect most of you will get it within the first 3 crates or so. And once you activate the operation order and start working on the chain of missions, you'll be able to extend those or renew them using tokens. Probably you'll have to do that several times until you've completed the chain. Good luck getting a Gebreski medal, which is the final mission in the chain. If, like many, you feel you won't have the time or perhaps the patience to work through the missions, certificates can be purchased from the shop that will allow you to skip difficult missions or even all of them. If you're watching this video at a later date, currently the World of Warplanes team tends to put former reward planes on sale around a year after the event that introduced them. If that's true, I'd expect to see the Tempest V PV on sale around May or June of 2025. As for this Tempest, it was fitted with 2 experimental underwing Vickers 47mm Class P anti-tank guns right at the end of World War II. You can hardly fail to see them on the plane model. Vickers was one of at least 3 companies asked to produce a large caliber weapon of this kind, and testing showed that the Vickers gun had potential, but with the end of the war the need for this variant of the Tempest disappeared and no production was ever undertaken. Little data about the Vickers guns exists, which gave the World of Warplanes team freedom to give them attributes of their own choosing. Some of you will have seen the early figures for the guns on GameModels3D.com and noted the very low shell velocity in particular. I was asked to carry out testing on the Tempest, and I submitted a report to the World of Warplanes team which, as you can see, suggested that the guns were a problem. I recommended they be altered, and I'm pleased to say the World of Warplanes team agreed, reconfiguring the guns significantly with improved shell velocity, a higher rate of fire, and a narrower dispersion angle. Further testing has shown that now they are at least serviceable, though I think you'll need good equipment and pilot skills to make them a pleasure to use. You should look forward to moments of mirth as you evaporate a full health Tier 8 fighter. So, now it's time to look at the plane's numbers. Here we have a spreadsheet showing all of the Tier 8 multi-role fighters. If you don't know how this spreadsheet works, there's a link in the description below to a video that explains what's going on here. Have a look at that and then come back to this section. In this comparison, the aircraft are in stock configuration, carrying ordnance if any is available to be mounted, not the case with the Tempest V, have no equipment or pilots but do have the top modules installed. Starting with the guns, you can see that the rating is 45 and the cumulative DPS is 580, both third best in class. If we look across, we can see that the J7W1's fearsome weaponry hits harder, and the ME109TL's guns have a higher DPS, although the rating is lower because the 30mm cannons do their work at fairly short range. However, the damage output from the Tempest is better than the other 2 snipers here, the SU-9 and the I-260. Getting into the details, there are 2 Vickers 47mm cannons which are mounted under the wings, and that's important as I'll explain in a moment, producing, of course, 290 DPS each. The rate of fire is 80 rounds per minute. Originally this was 70, so that's a pretty significant improvement, although it may not seem like it. The cannons have a sniper's range of over 3,400 feet, and the auto-aim angle, that's the amount you can be off target by and the game will correct your aim for you, is 2.5 degrees, which is as good as the snipers and several of the other cannons here. The dispersion angle, the way the shells spread out as they leave the muzzles of your guns, is 0.2 degrees, which is actually a little bit higher than the sniper guns on the SU-9 and the I-260, as you can see. However, it's a big improvement from the original nasty figure of 0.3 degrees. The time to overheat is 6 seconds. This is pretty good. That will allow you several shots before you have to cool the weapons. But the shell velocity is low at 912 feet per second. But the saving grace here is that that's a huge improvement on the original figure of 591 feet per second, a setting that I thought made the guns pretty much unusable. Now, I mentioned that the guns are mounted under the wings, which means that the shells will start separated but move towards each other, converging at, I think, something between 1500 and 2000 feet, after which they will start to separate again. Practically, this has two important effects. First, at long ranges you should be fine shooting at large targets, for instance bombers or ground attackers, but you'll likely miss with at least one shell if you're shooting at a fighter, particularly if it's manoeuvring. Secondly, you're likely to miss if you're close to a target with the shells flying around it rather than hitting it. The guns are really effective when shooting at mid-range targets. Bear all that in mind when you're selecting targets during a battle, and once you're shooting, try to align your wings with those of the target if you can. I've found that the guns are reliable, occasionally devastating, if I use them like this. Finally, the guns can be used against ground targets, but it's a slow business, rather like the guns of the Stuka G ground attacker. It takes 2 volleys to destroy an unarmoured section of target and 5 volleys for an armoured section. Don't overlook the opportunity to flip a sector by taking out suitable ground targets, but don't make it a priority. Talking of ground targets, the guns are your only option, as this version of the Tempest doesn't carry any ordnance. The airframe is nearly identical to that of the Tech Tree Tempest, which I reviewed recently, so I'm not going to go into great detail here. The survivability figure is standard for the class, with the fire resistance figure allowing you to carry a first aid dressing package rather than a fire extinguisher. The cruise speed is good, third best in class, but the maximum boost speed is third worst in class. The figures are slightly different from those of the Tech Tree Tempest, as you can see. The manoeuvrability is identical to the Tech Tree Tempest, which means that you can be competitive with all the multi-role fighters here, but given what I've said about the guns at short range, I don't recommend entering into dogfights deliberately. More on that in a moment. Finally, the power to weight ratios are the best in class, which may mean that the Tempest V accelerates well. Of course, we don't know what the drag coefficient is, and you have to believe those big gun pods under the wings will adversely affect performance. When I was asked to test this aircraft, the schedule was quite tight, so without much thought, I built the Tempest V in the same way as I built the Tech Tree Tempest, which is with a build biased towards manoeuvrability. That's a viable build for this new aircraft, but as I don't believe the guns are at all suited to dogfighting, which means I recommend you decline such engagements, I think you ought to consider a different kind of build, one suited to speed and pursuit, aiming to use the guns at long and particularly mid-ranges. I've yet to fly the plane this way, but in later sections I'll show you the numbers for such a build to help you decide if you want to try that first. So, let's go and look at your options for configuring this plane. Here we are with the Tempest V on the airfield again. You can see that I'm making this video before the start of the Gathering Storm event, and I'm able to show you this plane courtesy of the World of Warplanes team providing me with access to a press account. A big thanks to them for that, again. Although I specialised this plane with tokens, I didn't fly it in that configuration because, originally, there was a bug with the guns. They had different attributes to the guns in the stock configuration. That's since been fixed, but not before I'd got the footage for this video. Therefore, unusually, you'll see I have equipment mounted in the stock configuration. I wanted to show you how I flew this plane in the materials that you see in the video. When you first get this plane, you'll see 5 equipment slots, 1 on the cockpit, 2 on the airframe with 1 locked until specialisation, and 2 on the engine. There is no equipment slot for the forward-firing guns, you'll note. Double equipment slots on the airframe and engine means that when you have specialised the plane, you have the ability to produce a couple of combined manoeuvrability and speed builds, one biased towards manoeuvrability, one biased towards speed. I'll talk about the equipment for other builds separately. In the post-builds effects section, I'm going to show you the numbers for those builds, rather than the stock build configuration I've got here. However, when the plane is stock, whilst you still have those distinctive builds, one for manoeuvrability, this one you can see here, and one for speed, With a polished skin and uprated engine, the two builds are more differentiated than those in the specialist configuration. Bear in mind that the effects of choosing between builds is more pronounced when you fly this plane stock. For what it's worth, my experience of flying the plane didn't encourage me to use strengthening equipment on it, but that's more of a personal philosophical approach to flying planes in the game. I don't tend to favour that kind of equipment in most circumstances, outside of using some on bombers and ground attackers. You may have a different preference. Having shown you how I flew the plane in testing and in the battle replays you'll see later, now I've put the aircraft in specialist configuration and I'll talk about the ways you can build it in that. You'll see that I've moved the equipment across and I've added a polished skin in the now available second airframe slot. In the cockpit slot, I've opted for a gun sight, which is an obvious choice for long-range weapons like these Vickers cannons. I didn't find it necessary to mount cockpit armour, though occasionally when following a bomber with a well-configured rear gunner and, probably, using gold ammunition, I did lose the pilot twice inside a few seconds and had to break off from the engagement. That's a frustration I've chosen to live with. I don't think the plane is inherently fast enough to justify the use of a G-suit, but you may want to consider navigation or radio equipment, particularly if you're intending to build the aircraft primarily for speed and pursuit. This gives you an increased view range, making it easier for you to detect enemies, and makes it harder for you to be detected, which means you can perhaps sneak up on them, which is useful if what you're going to do most of is sniping, and that's quite likely in a plane like this. There's a bonus characteristic on the equipment that improves accuracy by 10% to partially compensate for not using a gun sight. The gun sight I've mounted is ultimate level equipment, fully calibrated, giving the improvements in accuracy, both dispersion and auto-aim angle, that you can see, at the cost of a higher risk of pilot injury. I've selected the bonus characteristics that improve the accuracy and offset the risk of pilot injury, as you can see there. With long-range weaponry like these cannons, I tend not to choose the characteristics that improve the chances of critical damage and fires, since I'm aiming to destroy planes in one pass, not cripple them in readiness for further passes. Taking the airframe and engine slots together for a moment, I prefer one of two builds. The first inclines towards manoeuvrability, and that's the build on display here, and uses a lightweight power unit alongside a piece of speed equipment. Generally, I prefer the equipment that improves boost efficiency over the uprated engine. The second build inclines towards speed, dropping the lightweight power unit in favour of that uprated engine. And those are the two builds, the numbers for which will be shown in the post-build effects section. Remember, in the stock configuration you lack one of the airframe slots, so the differences between these sorts of builds will be a little more obvious. On the airframe, I've mounted a lightweight wing frame and a polished skin. These pieces of equipment are at ultimate level and fully calibrated. In fact, all the equipment on the plane is. One of the other choices is a reinforced skin, which conceivably would be useful on a dogfighter, but I don't think this plane is suitable in that role, and I prefer to avoid the loss of speed using this equipment in tails. And the other choice is a reinforced airframe, which will give you a small increase in hit points at the cost of manoeuvrability. I don't think the extra hit points would be significant, though if you're prioritising speed but want to be a little more robust, perhaps you'd consider this piece of equipment. As you can see, the lightweight wing frame has been configured to produce improvement in all three axes of movement at the cost of a loss of aircraft hit points and the wing's resistance to critical damage. If you're successful at controlling most of your engagements, these adverse effects shouldn't be a concern. In this case, I've picked the bonus characteristics that improve manoeuvrability, but the other characteristics, offsetting the adverse effects of this equipment and improving the cruise speed, are good choices as well. With the polished skin, there's a significant improvement in cruise speed, which is highly desirable, and also acceleration whilst diving, which is nice to have, but not of great significance in my opinion. Plus, there's a slight increase in maximum boost speed. This has come at the cost of the loss of some manoeuvrability in two axes, as you can see. As I'm not interested in improving the acceleration whilst diving, I've opted for bonus characteristics that improve speed. In fact, all the improvement in maximum boost speed comes from the first bonus characteristic you see here, and the turn time. I could equally well have picked the bonus characteristic that improves the yaw. There are 4 pieces of equipment available for the 2 engine slots. The one I discount almost immediately is the engine armor protection because I'm not building a tank and I don't want to lose any speed. That said, you will probably notice the engine of the Tempest V being knocked out irritatingly often. Again, a frustration I've chosen to put up with. The other piece of unmounted equipment is the uprated engine, and I'll talk about that in a little while. With the lightweight power unit, ultimate level and fully calibrated remember, there are considerable improvements in manoeuvrability across two axes and an improvement in cruise speed. The adverse effect is a decrease in the engine's ability to resist damage. I've selected bonus characteristics that improve cruise speed. The bottom characteristic here produces all of this equipment's improvement in that regard. The yaw manoeuvrability and the one that offsets the decrease in the engine's ability to resist damage, the top one. The other characteristics give a little more cruise speed and more acceleration, both with and without boost. I'm happy with my choices here. This is a high-speed gas turbine, and it confers significant improvements in acceleration under boost, engine cooldown rate, and the maximum boost speed. The adverse effect is a loss of 15% of boost availability. The bonus characteristics improve the engine cooldown rate, which gets the boost back more quickly, the boost availability, offsetting some of the adverse effect the equipment produces, and the maximum boost speed. There are two more characteristics that improve the cooldown rate and the maximum boost speed, both by less than the ones I've selected, but you could use them to optimize either of those if you wish. And there's also one that improves acceleration under boost. However, I'm happy with my choices here too. I mentioned earlier in the video that I configured the Tempest V for manoeuvrability without giving it much thought, using the Tech Tree Tempest as a template. However, having realised that the new plane is not suited to dogfighting, I think it would be worth considering emphasising speed over manoeuvrability. In that case, you can drop the lightweight power unit and substitute an uprated engine for it, such as I've done here. Let's look at the kind of effects that would produce. Using an uprated engine will lower the plane's fire resistance. Here, I've mitigated what would have been a 33% loss by using a bonus characteristic that offsets it, and I think the fire resistance is still just high enough not to cause me to start taking countermeasures. However, if that's not true, you could use a fire extinguisher, or you could use an exhaust bleed inerting system. In fact, I think that's a good choice whether or not you're using an uprated engine. Or you could use precious skill points on the pilot for fire resistance or firefighter. Or you could use any combination of those. The benefit is a good increase in cruise speed. This should make the Tempest V a good pursuit plane and, with the guns working best at mid-ranges, a pretty effective one. I think this is a build well worth considering. Looking at consumables, I'm not using an uprated engine, so it's an easy choice for me to use the first aid dressing package because I loathe having my pilot injured and unable to shoot. And with this plane, that will be a particular drawback because the guns will become very inaccurate. If I were using an uprated engine, I'd still strive might and main to use this first aid dressing package if I could. I could possibly consider the fire extinguisher. Incidentally, if you've got any of these embellishments, sell them for credits. On the airframe you have two slots. I think the first one is a fairly obvious choice, the pneumatic control assist. This will help you if you're fighting another Tempest, perhaps the J7W1. However, the emergency control system I think isn't as useful, and I would give strong consideration and probably will drop it in favour of the exhaust bleed inerting system to reduce the chance of fire by 20%. And if you use an uprated engine, that becomes an even more obvious choice. In the engine, I always like to use engine cooling. Who doesn't like 10 seconds of extra boost on top of whatever they've currently got? Don't activate it if you have no boost available because it won't work. If you choose to concentrate mostly on mid-range engagements and sniping, if you get your engine shot out, it probably won't matter too much, so you don't need the bottle for the manual engine restart. If you must have speed, particularly if you're considering a speed build, then you might want to put on the improved mixture control. When it comes to ammunition, unless you're using gold, in which case you already know about those types, these three here, and I'm not going to talk about them, make sure you mount universal ammunition. I've opened up the pilot dialog box, and as this is a press account, I have the luxury of a 15 skill point pilot. I haven't got any of those on my regular account. The Tempest V can be, if you wish, a crew trainer for all and any of your British pilots. However, if you want to dedicate a pilot to the plane, then probably I'd prioritise getting the skills in something like this order. Marksman 1, Aerodynamics Expert, which possibly I'd drop as soon as I had another skill point in favour of Marksman 2, or keep Aerodynamics Expert and get Engine Guru 1, then with another skill point available, drop that and get Marksman 2 at that juncture. You can see I'm putting a high priority on getting the Marksman 1 and 2 skills. Then for a manoeuvrability build, I'd get a Aerodynamics Expert if I hadn't retained it, Aerobatics Expert, Engine Guru 1, work through cruise flight or battle tested, and then drop that with an extra skill point available to get Engine Guru 2, and then finish off with a 1-point skill of my choice. I've got Firefighter here, but I think I'd probably pick Eagle Eyed. With a speed build, again, I'd get an Aerodynamics Expert if I hadn't retained it, then go to Engine Guru 1, work through probably cruise flight on this occasion rather than battle tested. Then with another skill point available, I'd drop that for Engine Guru 2, and I'd finish with Resilience or possibly Adrenaline Rush, or just possibly cruise flight with a 1-point skill of my choice. Now we're going to look at the effects of my choices on the base figures of the aircraft. Those figures can be seen in columns C and D, and you've seen this before in the aircraft statistics section. The effects of my choices are in columns E and F. The difference between the two in absolute terms is in column G, and in percentage terms in column H. As a reminder, all of the equipment is ultimate level and fully calibrated, and it's a gun sight, lightweight wing frame, polished skin, lightweight power unit, and a high-speed gas turbine. The pilot, with 15 skill points, has Aerobatics Expert, Aerodynamics Expert, Engine Guru 1 and 2, Marksman 1 and 2, and Firefighter. Let's look at the effects on the guns first, and there are two, both on the accuracy attributes. The auto-aim angle, the amount you can be off target by, and the game will correct your aim so that you still hit it, has gone up from 2.5 degrees to nearly 2.9 degrees, a 15% improvement. You won't have to aim so carefully. And the dispersion angle, the way that the shells spread out as they leave the muzzle of your gun, has come down from 0.2 degrees to 0.15 degrees. That's a normal value for sniper cannons, although to be fair, the SU-9 and I-260 start with that value. And that's over 24% improvement. These guns are going to hit more reliably. There are no other effects on the guns, as you can see down here. Moving on to survivability, we have lost a rating point down to 9 from 10. That's entirely due to the loss of hit points, 26 of them, 6.6%, owing to the use of a lightweight wing frame. Other effects on the survivability, we have lost 10% of the wing's resistance to critical damage, 12% of the engine's resistance to critical damage, and 12% of the pilot's ability to resist injuries. On airspeed, with the high-speed gas turbine and polished skin in place, you'd expect some significant effects, and here they are. The rating has gone up to 67, an increase of 10, which is 17.5%. The cruise speed has gone up by 58 miles an hour to 350, very nice, and the maximum boost speed has gone up to 519 miles an hour. Significant improvement on that rather lackluster 457. That's a 62 mile an hour improvement. The price for that is losing some boost. We've lost 2.7 seconds, and that's come down to 15.3 seconds. Other effects on airspeed, there's a 19% improvement in acceleration with boost, 5% acceleration improvement without boost, 10% acceleration in a dive, and an improvement in the cooldown rate of the engine of 10%. We'd also expect a significant improvement in the manoeuvrability because we're using the lightweight wing frame and the lightweight power unit, and again that's true too. The rating has gone up to 74, that's 13 points increase. The average time to turn 360 degrees won't be the time that you take to turn every turn, of course, that depends on the circumstances, has come down to around about 9.7 seconds, very nearly an 11% improvement. The roll rate is up to a better 142. It's still not great, but it's a lot better than that 110, and that's a 29% improvement, a 32 degree per second improvement. And we've also got an improvement in the yaw manoeuvrability of 16.4%. There is also an improvement in the altitude performance, and that is coming from the high-speed gas turbine, and the climb rate has gone up from 440 feet per second to 494 feet per second. Now, I'm going to issue a word of caution here. Whilst that's nice and it means that you will be able to go up and chase aircraft a bit better, the guns range will encourage you to get well above your comfortable altitudes, and you may very well find, if you're not careful, that you're stalling, and at that point you become an easy target for everything else. Now I've added in a second build, one biased towards speed. The effects of that are shown in columns I and J. The difference between that and the base figures is expressed in absolute terms in column K and in percentage terms in column L. We have all ultimate level equipment fully calibrated, gun sight, lightweight wing frame, polished skin, familiar from the previous build, but here's the change. An uprated engine has been substituted in for the lightweight power unit, and then we have the familiar high-speed gas turbine. Same pilot as before, same skills. We can ignore the guns. We have the same accuracy effects as we had in the previous build, but there is an effect on survivability. We've still got a rating of 9, but in addition to losing 26 hit points, we've now lost 14 points of fire resistance. And the only way of knowing whether we need to take some of the countermeasures that I outlined in the earlier part of the video will be by flying the plane and finding out whether we catch fire more often, so much so that those countermeasures, or at least some of them, are needed. Other effects on survivability, two familiar ones. We lost 10% of the wing's resistance to critical damage and 12% of the pilot's ability to resist injuries, but the adverse effect on the engine's resistance to critical damage has disappeared. Now, with a build biased towards speed, you'd expect a better improvement than the previous build, and that's so. We've got a rating of 71, 4 points better than the previous build, 14 points better than the base. That comes from the cruise speed now being 378 miles an hour, which is an 86 mile an hour improvement, nearly 30%. Still got the improvement in the boost maximum speed of 500 up to 519. That's a 62 mile an hour, as a reminder, improvement. Unfortunately, we've retained the loss of 2.7 seconds of boost availability, still down to 15.3 seconds. Other effects, still got the 19% acceleration with boost improvement, but now we've got a 20.4% improvement in the acceleration without boost, rather better than the previous build. We've also got the 10% acceleration in the dive and the 10% engine cooldown rate. Both of those were in the previous build as well. Where we gain in speed, we ought to lose in manoeuvrability. That's true. We've got an improvement from base figures up to 67 in the rating, 6, but that's rather worse than the previous build. And that's because the average turn time, whilst it's still come down to 10.25 seconds, over half a second improvement, that's not as good as the previous build. The roll rate, we still got all the improvements of the previous build, 32 degrees per second, but now we've got a very slight worsening of the yaw manoeuvrability, 0.4%. On the altitude performance, we've got the same improvement as before, 494 feet per second climb rate, which is an improvement of 54 feet per second. So those are the two main builds I would concentrate on in specialist mode. I hope these figures will help you decide between the maneuverability incline build or the speed incline build, or indeed make you decide that that's nothing that that you want to do and you've got your own ideas and you're going to use them. This is what I call the performance evaluation. That is the outcomes of 25 battles fought at different parts of the day in different parts of the week in order to get a representative sample. And this is all solo work. None of these battles were fought in flight. The first thing to note is an excellent win rate of 80%. This is well above my average across all aircraft of 65% and way above the 56% I got in a previous performance evaluation of the Tempest V with the guns as they were originally configured. And that evaluation was with a much more favourable set of battle tiers. This set, I was down tiered, that is at battle tier 9, 64% of the time. Averages. If we look at chevrons first, I averaged 2.1 chevrons. Now, there are some multi-roles, and I think this is one of them, where it's quite difficult to get high numbers of chevrons because of the dual requirement of getting defensive kills and defensive capture points. The Tempest V, in my opinion, is not a dogfighter, and in many circumstances, it's not a good idea to hang around in the sector trying to get defensive kills. The maximum was 4. I never achieved 5, and that means there were no Hero of the Sky achievements. Average personal points was 11,688. This isn't statistically significant. However, in the previous performance evaluation with those original guns, it was only 9,600. So this seems like a considerable step up in performance to me. You can see the maximum was 18,565. So you are going to get some good battles in this plane. Rank averaged 1.8, that is better than 2. You can see in this column there were lots of first places. The worst position was 6th. Average number of kills 11.4, which is pretty good. Maximum was 18. Aerial target damage 6,122 on average. There's an outlier game here of 13,057. Probably a game where I was sitting over a mining plant actually defending because bombers and ground attackers were feeding themselves to me. I didn't prioritise getting ground targets. I only took the opportunity to flip a sector with ground targets, and therefore in this column you can see that there are occasionally 2s, more often 1s, but most of all no ground targets destroyed at all. The average was therefore quite low, 1,461 damage to ground targets with a maximum of 6,609. Nevertheless, the guns do function in the manner of a Stuka G, and where particularly an unarmoured target can be destroyed and flip a sector to you, you should take that opportunity. Capture points averaged 370, the maximum was 610, the worst was 80. Now, the next 3 columns refer to the class-specific missions for multi-roles. First one is attacking capture points. The average there was 230. Funnily enough, the maximum was 610 again, and the minimum was 80. Sector captures, average 2.1, and if I put a speed build on this aircraft, which I'm quite likely to do, I would expect that to go up. Maximum was 4 and minimum was 1. Defensive kills, I tended not to hang around in sectors defending in most of my battles, so the average was only 3.6, but we do get that outlier game of 11 kills, probably the mining plant destroying bombers and ground attackers. With the high alpha guns, that's a good thing for this plane to do. I tend to die a bit more in this plane than I do in most, nearly 2 twice a battle. The highest was 4. Occasionally I managed to get through a battle without dying. In fact, I think I only did that once. As for medals, a little bit thin on the ground, only 6 Winged Legends, 1 Lambert, 1 McCampbell and 1 Cotteret Dove, but I can tell you that's a lot more medals than I earned in the first performance evaluation of this aircraft with the guns in their original configuration. Now, this is a fairly strong set of figures, but let's remember I've got a 15 skill point pilot and lots of equipment which is fully calibrated and at the ultimate level. If you're working through this aircraft stock, you don't have such a highly skilled pilot, your equipment is not at ultimate level and not fully calibrated, I think this aircraft is going to be a bit of a challenge, particularly at Battle Tier 9. It will probably be all right at Battle Tier 8. Once you get it highly specified, as I have in this instance, it's going to be a good performer at Battle Tier 8 and a reasonable performer, an average performer at Battle Tier 9. What it isn't is an overpowered aircraft, and I, for one, am pleased that the World of Warplanes team hasn't produced one of those. Well, after all those numbers, perhaps we should see how the plane flies in battle. So here we are on the Alpine Gambit map. It's the collision variant with 5 sectors in a very skewed 5 spots of the die configuration. In the centre, therefore tactically important because it allows easy access to the other sectors, is the strategically important military base, the most important sector on the map, because it fires rockets at nearby sectors to try and flip them to your side. On each side of the map, but unusually not particularly near the spawn points, are the next most important sector strategically, and that's a pair of repair air bases. Now, because it's not central, the repair function isn't that useful compared to an airbase that's in the centre of the map. Nevertheless, you can get a new aircraft of the same tier if you're fully destroyed, and if the enemy happens to hold the garrison that's near to the airbase, you can use it as a spawn point to try and attack that. And of course, having mentioned that, the other 2 sectors, which this time are near each spawn point, are a pair of make-weight garrisons. The way to win this map is certainly to try and hold the military base for longer than the enemy, your local garrison, and often it devolves down to holding what nominally is the enemy's airbase, although it is a long way from the spawn point, rather than your own airbase, because that's a long way to travel. If you hold at least those 3 sectors, you'll probably win this battle. And if we look at the order of battle, we can see that there are 3 tier 9s on my team. None of them are specialised. We have an ME-1099B2 German ground attacker, what can be a powerful tier 9 bomber, the Junkers 287, again German, and then a sniper aircraft at tier 9, the I-211, although that's a little bit odd in that the weapons are actually smaller caliber than the preceding aircraft. There's also a Horton 229, again another sniper, this team is full of snipers, and myself in the Tempest V. On the enemy team, they have two tier 9s, an unspecialized P228, which has very strong weaponry as top guns. Can't be sure that they are here. Another German ground attacker, the ME-109B2. And then they have an aircraft I have recently described as an excrescence in the game, the B-29C, although this is a tier 9 battle, so perhaps it won't be quite as powerful as it would be in a tier 8 battle. Definitely something to be careful of, and because of the defensive firepower. A specialized Dornier 325A1, which is more of a, I would say, a multi-role than a true heavy. Also a sniper aircraft and carrying a really good payload of 4 bombs, and then a specialized Vampire F1. And if I look at this lineup of aircraft, I would say the enemy has an advantage, but of course we don't know how the pilots are going to fly them. Let's see how the battle panned out. As we head into battle, my priority is the most important sector on the map, which is the military base, so I'm going to go there. I signal my intent, maybe some of the humans will come with me. A bot answers, but that would have been going there anyway. That kind of instruction to bots is more useful later in a battle. So I'm looking for ground attackers here. I'll also shoot AA guns as well. And the first target that comes into view is a low altitude AA gun, which could shoot me, so why not get rid of it? So a couple of volleys destroy that, 5 volleys for armoured sections to target. As I turn, I'm heading straight towards the P228, so I take avoidance action, small hit on me there. I turn around and it makes the mistake of trying to turn. So now I can work it over with the guns, and you can see that as I hit it, when I hit it, big chunks of health disappear. Got a bit excited here, so I've overheated the guns. I've got to wait, and then I finish it off. There's a ground attacker behind me, so I swing for that. Then I realise that there's another enemy aircraft that I need to watch out for. That's the Dornier 335, but that chooses to fly off into the distance. So with a bit of luck, I can turn for the ground attacker, although at that point I get my wing damaged. It's an IL-20, and you can see that as I'm hitting that, big chunks of health come off as well. Down it goes. That's a high hit point aircraft, and I destroyed it with these. This aircraft is really good for taking down ground attackers. Decided that the bomb was a bit high for me, and that's something you've got to be aware of at all times. And here I get suckered into trying to get the Dornier 335, so I'm going straight up. It's not going to be too long before I get to the point where I'm going to stall. And this is the kind of engagement you need to control very carefully. In this particular case, the Dornier comes down, fortunately for me. I'll try and ping him with some shots. However, he does exactly the right thing. He rolls and wiggles, makes it difficult for a sniper aircraft to land shots. He's now effectively out of range, so I choose to disengage and go for the ground attacker that's coming in from my right. And this is the human player in the German ground attacker again. A little bit close, so I don't go too fast. I swing away a bit late here. I'm not sure what damaged my engine there. Was it a bomb or was it the rear gunner? I've still got my pilot though, and now I begin to lay into the German ground attacker. Overheated the guns again. Got to be careful about that. Shouldn't do that. Pilot gets injured, so I put him back in. Wait, and then I get a shot off and destroy the ground attacker. Now with 6 seconds overheat, you really ought to be avoid overheating the guns, but I got excited. So we can see the IL-20 is coming in. I ignored the multi-role that was in my vicinity. It flew away. I was watching that arrow, and then I spot the Vampire. Rather than finishing with the IL-20, that Vampire could very well threaten me if he finishes off that multi-role, which he's likely to do, so I want to try and catch him whilst he's busy. I don't land anything until I land a double volley, and then he just evaporates. Meantime, I think the ground attacker has been taken out. It has, as you can see from the order of battle there. And coming in on almost exactly the same path as previously, go find the ME-1099B2. So shooting at range, just adjusting, trying to be a little bit more careful, but this time I've got my wings not in line with the aircraft, and here I get stubborn. I go in after him over a target, and he drops a bomb. Now I do kill him, he kills me. That's a good trade, but I could have avoided that. So we spawned at the airfield, which we've captured, and not that far away is the P228, so I fly towards it, waiting for an opportunity to shoot it. The game says I can now, but I know the range on the guns is certainly not 3,500 feet, not with any reliability. I wait to get closer. Now we're at less than 3,000 feet, and it's swinging below me. I shoot it. See, I've taken off a lot of health, and I've also destroyed its engine. A couple of more volleys, both of which hit, and down goes the P228. Now, the enemy has captured the military base at this juncture, so I'm looking for things to do before I see an opportunity to get in there. I don't want to go in there when it's still locked. And it's becoming a recurring theme here. The German ground attacker is heading towards me with intent, so I outmaneuver it and I get behind it. Now we're going to see a perfect demonstration of the sweet spot of these guns. We're at something like 1800 feet, 2000 feet, just a little bit over, and the guns are hitting this ground attacker beautifully. They're behaving perfectly, both shells are landing, and basically the ground attacker, as near as a ground attacker ever does, melts for me. The Seahawk I managed to clip, and then I managed to land the shells even at close range and absolutely obliterate it. So we saved this garrison. So now it's either a question of getting repairs or perhaps helping with the attack on the military base. Now I've lost quite a bit of health, so I decide that I'm going to try and defend the airbase and pick up some repairs at the same time, and trust my team taking the military base. Two tenors above me. The enemy captures another sector, so in fact now keeping this airbase if we can becomes even more important. Swing towards a BVP 212 back wing, that gets destroyed by my team, and then I see, unsurprisingly, the ME-1099B2 ground attacker. It's an old friend by now, so I begin to shoot at it. A little bit closer this time, and perhaps the guns aren't quite as effective. Maybe one of the shells is going round the aircraft rather than hitting it. Nonetheless, the health is disappearing fairly quickly. I'm being careful with the guns. Down he goes, and then, as a vote of confidence and a salutation, the I-211 flies straight through me and destroys me. So we spawn in again at the airbase, which is still under threat, so I want to try and protect it. My team has captured the military base during the time that I was out of the game. See the Seahawk, managed to get the lead right and it disappears. This isn't ideal for attacking a B-29C. From underneath he's good, but I'm a bit behind it, which means that he will be able to train his guns on me if he spots me. I'm hoping the big hits will dispose of him before he can do me significant harm. And that's exactly what happens, just as he was beginning to get a bead of me. The J7W1 fortunately isn't pointing at me, so I obliterate that. I've got to be careful of that. Then I notice that there's a back wing coming straight at me, so I just avoid the rockets. They flew straight above my plane as I rolled. Now I'm trying to hit this particularly difficult aircraft, and gratifyingly I get it first time. So now we're going to pick up repairs and we're going to head towards the military base. So the Winged Legend has gone through. It's been a productive game in terms of damage. Got my repairs. And here we go. My team is now beginning to get thoroughly on top. We've got 4 sectors currently. See the Dornier flying low and apparently dogfighting. And then I spot a low health IL-20, and I know I can take that out quickly, and do with these guns. The Dornier is almost heading towards me, but not quite, so he doesn't shoot me. He's lost his engine, so he's easy meat, and down he goes. In the distance I see the ME-1099B2, but I decide to take out a sniper aircraft, and that gives me the Koshidon medal. And the enemy has managed to take this military base, but we are so far ahead at this stage it doesn't matter. So I can just concentrate on destroying aircraft and whittling the enemy team down. That removes the Seahawk. Thinking about chasing the ME-1099B2 ground attacker, keeping tabs on the Vampire, and then above me the air defense heavies spawn. So I decide to shoot those, and here's where the guns misbehave. Lots of shots, aiming's not good enough, and the shells fly hopelessly around the aircraft. I swap target in the hope of having an easier time of it. Not really. Not landing anything, my lead's not good enough here. This is where it's really important to try and get your wings aligned with the aircraft you're shooting at, otherwise you're very likely to find that one of the shells will go missing. And this perfectly illustrates why I say that this is good as a mid-range sniper, but once you get to long range it's not as reliable. And there my team takes the military base and this game is all over. It's a good win. There we have it. Over 18,000 personal points, a winged legend and a kosher dub. An effective battle in the Tempest V. At this point, normally there would be the results review, but now that I'm including performance evaluations showing the outcomes of 25 battles, I'm not sure the results review is contributing much to my videos. So on this occasion, I'm omitting it. If you feel strongly that the results review is a useful part of my videos, please let me know in the comments below. So, that brings me to the end of my review of the Tempest V PV, which I'm pleased to say is not an overpowered monster, like some previous reward planes have been, though when flown stock without fully optimised equipment and perhaps a pilot with a relatively low number of skill points, it may edge over into being a difficult plane in which to do consistently well. Nonetheless, the World of Warplanes team did a good job when they improved the guns. I don't think many would have liked the guns as they were originally, and I've enjoyed flying the plane. I'm looking forward to trying a speed build instead of the manoeuvrability build I've so far used, and perhaps getting even better results than I've had so far. If you're planning to grind through the chain of combat missions for the plane, I wish you steady progress and the best of luck. And that's it. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, that you'll come and see my future content. Stick around, there's a bonus unnarrated battle coming up, but this is where I leave you. This is the Noble Q, signing off.